How many of you, by show of hands, know who Captain Underpants is? Wonderful. But for those who don't, he's a children's superhero created by two elementary school boys. He's actually my favorite superhero. Not because it's fun to say the word underpants, but because he's altruistic. He has a great imagination, he's honest, and he values friendship. All the qualities that I hope I have. You see, I'm an optimist. I lead this kind of bubble-wrapped, unicorns, Skittles, and rainbows kind of life. Some, like my wife Lori, think I'm naive. I think it's a wonderful way to go through life. I also believe that 95% of bad things that you think about never happen, and the other 5%, you can deal with. So I'm having lunch one day with a longtime friend. His name is Brian. And he drops this bombshell. He says, Dan, I'm in stage 4 renal failure. And next week, I'm going to the University of Minnesota and in all likelihood going to become one of 95,000 people in this country to be placed on a waiting list for a kidney. Wow. So that night, I'm Googling the University of Minnesota and stage 4 renal failure. And you know what? Brian's one sneeze away from dialysis. So from that website, I learned 4 things. Of the 15,200 people who got a kidney transplant last year, only 5,800 came from a living donor. If you got a kidney from a living donor, you actually have better health outcomes. Third is if you gave a kidney, you live longer than the rest of the population. And lastly, 13 people a night come off that list, not because they gave a kidney today, or they got a kidney today, but because they died waiting for that kidney. So at the bottom of the right corner of the website, there's this little tab that says, if you're interested in learning more about being a living kidney donor, click here. I figured, what the hell? This is a simple math problem. I've got 2 kidneys. Brian needs one. I probably can live with one. Take mine. You know, that simple little keystroke, and I filled out an online survey as I hit that keystroke, set off a journey that I never imagined I would take. So I'm sitting at home one day, and out of the corner of my eye, my wife Lori is opening a piece of mail from the University of Minnesota. Thank you for your interest in the Living Kidney Donation Program. You see, I never told her that I filled out this online survey. So I did what all great optimists do. I minimized the situation. I said, Brian's got a challenging health situation. I filled out this survey, and only 6.5% of people who fill out this survey actually donate a kidney to the University of Minnesota. There's a number of steps to go through, and they only took 84 people last year. I've had multiple surgeries. I've got autoimmune issues. They'd be fools if they called me. I really can't tell you what her next words were. But it's safe to say she was imprinting the Go Team Dan t-shirts. I get a call a couple days later from the University of Minnesota. Transplant coordinator introduces herself and says, I've got a few questions about the online survey you took, but you know what? We want to send you to the next step, which involves just a bit of blood work and a urine sample. So I called Lori. Of course they want you to go to the next step. I said, hang on, it's just a bit of free lab work. Don't worry about it. The blood work turns out to be 17 tubes of blood. They thought I was getting dizzy, so they offered me juice and crackers. I'm thinking, free treats. And you know what? All of that lab work comes back normal. Then there was this urine collection. This isn't your typical pee in a cup, hand it to somebody collection. This was a 24-hour contribution. How do you do that? The woman behind the lab gives me this incredulous look, bends down, hands me a gallon container and says, well, the first time you go, you write the time down. 24 hours later, you bring it back. By the way, how much water did you drink a day? About 2 gallons. She immediately bends down and hands me another container. Not my first rodeo, honey. So here I am with these 2 gallons walking out of the waiting room, this crowded waiting room, and I hear this voice in back of me going, remember that urine needs to be refrigerated. So imagine with me, if you would, in your fridge, you've got your milk, your eggs, your yogurt, your urine, and your butter. So I start filling up that first container, and you know what? I top that baby off, and I'm going into that second container, and my manliness is kicking in. Testosterone is oozing out of every pore of my body, and the next day, I bring those 2 bottles of chilled urine, I drop them off at her desk, and I cannot wait for my transplant coordinator to call me. Wow, she gushed, you have great kidney filtration. What do you say to that? Thanks. We'd love for you to come to the University of Minnesota for the physical of your life. I'm thinking, what better than go to the land of 10,000 lakes in January? So I did what I always do. I called Lori, and you guessed it. Of course you passed and they want you to have a physical. I said, hang on, I've got great kidney filtration, and it's a free physical. So knowing this, Lori wanted somebody to go with me because as optimists, we tend to minimize things. So somebody needed to take notes and ask questions. Conveniently, my daughter Sarah lives in Minneapolis, so she draws the short straw. And most of my family, because of the multiple surgeries I've had, think I'm just a bit fragile. I respectfully disagree. So every time a nurse practitioner, the dietitian, the transplant coordinator, the nephrologist, the psychologist, each one of them, when they come in and say, wow, you really are a healthy 58-year-old, I turned to my daughter Sarah and said, write that down. But when they all explained the risks of donating a kidney and living with one kidney, the financial risks, the medical risks, and all the risks emotionally to your family, I didn't want that to be written down. So I minimized it. And then at the end of the day, we got to meet the transplant surgeon. So he explains the procedure, shows me a 3D imaging of my kidneys, which is really kind of cool, and then says, I need to make a 4-inch incision right above your belly button. My daughter asks, why 4 inches? And we're thinking there's a medical reason for this. No. He said, I need to go in, I need a bit enough space to go in and grab the kidney. And that's about 4 inches. Perfect sense. So that night, when I was going home, I knew a couple things. Number one, that Sarah would have already sent the notes to Lori that she took for the day, and that we'd be discussing this. So I remember clearly what I had for dinner that night. I had a salad, Lori had a steak, and she got a side of brutal honesty and transparency about my physical. On March 16th, I get a call from the University of Minnesota. Congratulations. The transplant team has determined you are compatible to donate a kidney. Great. Called Lori. Of course you're compatible to donate a kidney. I said, well, I'm compatible, but it doesn't say I'm compatible with Brian. The next day, congratulations. You are directly compatible with Brian. Please give us a call. So I called Lori. Of course you're directly compatible. I said, hang on, though. You know, I've never been in a position like this. I never imagined over the course of 6 months that I'd be in a position to have to make a decision like that. So when I called my transplant coordinator, she said, when do you want to schedule surgery? And now, being a healthy 58-year-old has kind of come back and bite me in the butt. Captain Underpants has got a problem here. So Lori and I, the next day, were having breakfast. And I said, what do I do? And her answer both surprised me and actually showed how much she cares and loves me. She said, you know what? We live our lives and make big decisions within two areas, risk and reasonable risk. Everything that you've told me, everything that I've read, and everything that you've had tested appears to be a reasonable risk, financially, medically, and for our family. So even though I may not be the biggest fan of what you might want to do, I'll support whatever decision you make. Great. I was kind of hoping she'd say, I'll divorce you if you do this. But you know what? That'd have been easy, because I'd have called my transplant coordinator, and just like that, I said, I'm out. But you know what? Now it was my decision. It was mine alone. The next 6 days were hell. I lost some sleep. I couldn't eat. Didn't ask anybody's opinion. Prayed a bit. What in God's green earth am I thinking? Why do I want to give a healthy organ to anybody? And then all the what if questions come into my mind. What if something goes wrong? What if my recovery is longer than normal? What if I can't be a healthy 58-year-old anymore? What if I die? Crap, that would suck. But then, in the middle of the night, I heard my mother's voice. And she said, Danny, if you're ever in a position or privileged enough to help somebody, regardless of the risk, you've got to do it. Because that's why you're here. Not helping, Mom. On May 17th, I was fortunate enough to be the 18th person at the University of Minnesota to become a living kidney donor this year. And as of today, the 4,715th person across the United States to be a living kidney donor this year. And the best part is my kidney, now in Brian's body, started working immediately. I was in the hospital for 2 days. My recovery went well. And in the end, I'm a healthy 58-year-old. But when I got home, all my friends and neighbors considered me a hero. What courage you have. Such selflessness. What a gift you gave. And on and on and on. Some even said, there's a special place in heaven for people like you. You know what? Thank you, but I see it just a bit differently. This was a great 6-month adventure, one that took me far outside of my comfort zone. And in the end, my mom was right, as she always was. I was privileged, and I was put in a position to help Brian maybe one day hug his grandchildren. Extending somebody's life, God, it just doesn't get a whole lot better than that. We live in a very small world. And within 5 or 6 degrees of separation, each one of us has a friend who's got a brother, who's got an uncle, who's got a niece, who's got an aunt, who probably is on the kidney waiting list. Would somebody in the audience today join me? Make Captain Underpants proud and lower the donation list just by 1. Thank you.